Okay, I think I'm live. Let me just double check to make sure that I absolutely am live, and then we will get started. Perfect. Okay, I can see that I am live. Good. So hello, my name is Nick Sierra. In this Facebook Live, I'm going to cover how to master 11 plus maths to get grammar and independent school offers. And hello, Uma, I can see that you have joined us. Nice to have you on here. I hope you're well. In fact, if you are watching this and you can see this, say hello and down below in the comments. Let me know that you are here. I can see 3 people are on here, and I'm sure that if you can see this, then hopefully, or that you can hear me, that you can see me. Saba, I can see that you're here too. Thank you for the like. Drop me a hello in the comments down below. Tell me that you're here. Would love to know who is here with me watching this. Hello, Helen. Hope you're doing well. So yes, like I said, it's all about 11 plus maths today. I'm going to cover a training on how to master 11 plus maths to get grammar and independent school offers, because it's often like this really elusive process, you know, especially if you are targeting multiple different schools. You might be aiming for some GL schools, some grammar schools, maybe some chem exams. You might be targeting a mix of independent schools and grammar schools. And because of that, it can be quite difficult to know exactly what to do. Like your child probably, the maths in school they find quite easy. And then you've probably heard of the 11 plus as this very complicated, difficult process. And so it's all about just kind of piecing together what to actually do. This can really be a source of a lot of frustration for parents. It's just the not knowing what to do. And so my goal here today is just to really clear that up and make it very straightforward to know exactly how to help your child to improve within maths. What are the key actions to take? And also just kind of getting an overall sense of what the examiners are looking for. How is it that you can actually get an edge on exam day and ultimately help your child to be positioned so that they do actually get an offer? So that is really what today's all about. Hello, Saba. Thank you for the welcome, and big shout out to Saba for letting me hold this Facebook Live tonight. Normally, I post Facebook Lives in my own group, so it's a real honor to be invited into other groups to also share Facebook Lives like this. Okay, so without further ado, we're just going to get into it. And now this is going to be very off the cuff. I have delivered this training before, so I am going to kind of deliver it off the cuff, but I hope that it is a useful one. Okay, so with 11 plus maths, I've been teaching 11 plus maths for 8 years, by the way. So I started as a maths tutor. Originally, I tutored maths when I was doing my GCSEs, and it was quite a spontaneous decision, because in school, maths was always my favorite subject. I really enjoyed maths. And then when I was 15 years old doing my GCSEs, I was given the opportunity by my school to fundraise money so that I could then go on a 3-week expedition to Tanzania. They essentially said that if I fundraised whilst doing my GCSEs £4,000 over the 2 years, then with that money, I would be able to fund a trip for me to go to Tanzania for 3 weeks and do volunteering work. And this was seen, you know, by me as an incredible opportunity. I was like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And obviously the £4,000 is a lot of money to raise, but it was going to be used for materials for the volunteering work that we eventually did, which was at a school. We helped at the school to build their foundations, also teaching maths and English. Actually, also we climbed Kilimanjaro, and it was an incredible 3-week expedition. And so it was because of having to fundraise this £4,000 that gave me the motivation initially to start tutoring maths. I was kind of washing up dishes in a local cafe, earning £5 per hour on Sunday mornings. I was thinking, okay, there's got to be other ways that I can actually fundraise the money. And it was because I really loved maths in school and I was good at maths. It was my favorite subject, that I decided that I would advertise myself as a maths tutor. And so I did that for a couple of years. I eventually raised money and went to Tanzania, had an incredible time. And then upon returning and starting sixth form, by this point I was fully booked. And so I'd be cycling around on my bicycle after school, visiting local families, tutoring maths after school for the 11 plus for GCSEs and for the year 6 SATs. Tutoring maths, I'd grown through referrals, and I was fully booked. And so then I began hiring other classmates within my sixth form as maths and English tutors. So I got my business up and running. Parents would basically come to me. I would do some of the tutoring myself, and then I would also line up other classmates who were also A&A star tutors for maths and English tuition. And so getting this business up and running is what I did alongside my studies during sixth form. And I just absolutely loved it. I was like so absolutely obsessed with what this business could be, that I gave it my all, and I really focused on it for those 2 years and decided not to apply to university in the end, but instead to build the business full time, which I've been doing now for 5 years. And so within that time, we initially did all different subjects, but then I narrowed down to focus on the 11 plus maths, which I've been doing for the last few years. But now I also partner with specialists for the other subjects, and we're currently delivering a summer course, and delighted to be working with some absolute professionals, some who produce the real questions for 11 plus exams, and others who teach at top prep schools in London, helping large cohorts of students to prepare for super selective grammar and independent schools. And I focus on the 11 plus maths, but like I say, I have other partners that focus on the other subjects. And so it's because of that I've been doing this for 8 years and spoken to so many different families. I've helped a few hundred students to pass the 11 plus, primarily by focusing on the maths, that I feel that I've learned quite a lot. And it's because of that I hold these trainings sometimes, just to kind of share what I believe to be the most important strategies to actually pass 11 plus, particularly when it comes to 11 plus maths. This is really what I hope to share with you tonight. Some valuable takeaways that you can implement at home to help your child to improve their 11 plus maths, to actually improve the odds that they ultimately pass 11 plus and receive grammar independent school offers. So does that all sound good? Can you all hear me? Is this the kind of training that you would like to hear? And if so, this is something that we can get stuck into tonight. Umair, yeah, you should have come to Tanzania. It was an incredible experience. Okay, so really, when it comes to 11 plus maths, there are 3 areas that make all the difference, and they are curriculum, problem solving, and speed. So when it comes to the curriculum, what this means is that you have to make sure, and this is really the bare minimum to be competitive, by the way, you have to have all of the Key Stage 2 curriculum mastered. And that includes the Year 6 content, which students will usually learn in Year 6. However, when they take their 11 plus exam for the grammar schools in September and the private schools slightly later, but in any case, in early Year 6, the expectation is actually that they already know all of the Year 6 curriculum and all of the Key Stage 2 curriculum. They have to know it inside out, back to front. So that includes ratio, algebra, percentages, decimals, fractions, geometry, etc., measurements, and so on. So all of these curriculum topics, for example, you need to know how to solve equations, you need to know how to split an amount by a ratio. All of the curriculum topics, the fundamental mathematical knowledge, is an absolute bare minimum requirement to be competitive. This is what the vast majority of all students will go into the exam knowing. Any student, particularly any parents that are actively helping their children to prepare the 11 plus, parents like yourself that are actually showing up in these Facebook groups looking to learn information, all students that have parents that are, proactively preparing for 11 plus will make sure that their children understand the Key Stage 2 curriculum inside out. So that is really the bare minimum requirement, but mastering that is very important. It's the Year 6 curriculum. I also have a free topic list, which you should be able to see within the description of this video. So that's a free topic list that we created about 2 years ago, and I can, it's in there in the link in the description, but that gives you the full list of topics. Now, for some schools, you do also see some topics which are a bit of an extension to that. So for example, typically in Year 6, the equations that you solve will always be very basic. So it might be like something as simple as 12x equals 144, and students will need to solve to work out that x equals 12. So that would be like a very basic Year 6 equation. However, what you will see in the 11 plus is that they will take multiple different topics and they'll say, well, okay, students, they know about negative numbers. They also know about fractions. They know about square numbers. They know about brackets. And so it's not uncommon in the 11 plus to see equation solving that includes fractions, decimals, negative numbers, brackets, etc. So they can kind of combine elements of different topics, throw it together, and make a question that seems way beyond Year 6. However, actually, if you know Year 6 maths, then technically you could work it out. And so very often 11 plus maths questions will seem way harder than anything that they're likely to see in Year 6, and that is true. However, the core skills that you need to know, particularly for the grammar schools, it's only Year 6 maths. So mastering the curriculum, incredibly important. That's the first thing. Is this all making sense? Give me a yes in the comments down below if this is all making sense and you are still with me. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's mastery of the curriculum. In addition, what's really important to learn is problem solving, or sometimes called reasoning. So when it comes to reasoning, and I'm going to share my screen with you to show you something in a second, but curriculum is the first thing, reasoning is the second thing, and reasoning is often shown in the word problems. Now, this is often what differentiates students that actually receive offers from students that actually aren't quite able to make the cutoff. And that can often be because of the reasoning skills. The curriculum is the bare minimum. Reasoning questions, those really tricky reasoning questions, word problems that have lots of different steps. This is actually the kind of thing that we covered in class earlier on today. We're currently delivering a summer course, but essentially with these questions here, the reasoning questions can be made to be very difficult. And I'll see if I can show you an example of a question in a second. But essentially, reasoning is how you differentiate, because the schools are basically looking for students that they believe to have the most academic ability and potential. And because that they know that all students will have the curriculum mastered, they need a way to select who they believe to be the best students on the day. And the way that they can do that is through the word problems, creating questions that require really strong mathematical reasoning skills, really strong figuring out skills, so that it's not just like multiply this number by this number, but it's much more like a contextual question with lots of information that you have to discern what's relevant, what's going on in the question, and then formulating a plan to solve that question. That can be often how a lot of these questions are made difficult, and how the students, like your child, can actually differentiate themselves from others by being able to figure out these much more difficult questions. And I'll see if I can show you an example of that. Like, for example, so here would be like really random example. But for example, here, like, so it might say, like, for example, and this is not that difficult, but let's say, what is the angle between the minute and hour hand? Now, see, I'll actually just get my tablet so I can explain this. But it might say, excuse me. So it might say, what is the angle between the hour, the minute, and the hour hand? And so again, this is a kind of question that you have to understand what's going on, and you have to use your reasoning skills to figure out what's going on, and then also use your skills to figure out what to do about it. And so if it's asking what is the angle between the minute and hour hand, well, what you can do is you can realize, well, okay, so a clock is a circle, isn't it? And we know that a circle has 360 degrees. And so because of that, if we know that a circle has 360 degrees, and we know that a clock has 12 numbers on it, I'll just label these ones for now. If we know that a clock has 12 numbers on it, in fact, let's get them all on just for clarity. So we know that a clock has 12 numbers, and we know that because it has 12 numbers and all the way around a circle is 360 degrees, well, we can therefore figure out that if we divide that by 12, we could work out that between each number on the clock, this must be 30 degrees. So this is 30 degrees, this is 30 degrees, this is 30 degrees, and so on. So we can figure out, okay, so between each number is 30 degrees, and we want to know the angle between the minute and the hour hand, and we're told that it's 8:30. So we have to use our reasoning skills to figure out, okay, well, if it's 8:30, then we know that this minute hand, just by reasoning, okay, well, it looks like it's completely vertically down, and also we know that it's 30 past, so it must be on the 6. So that's fine. But then also we need to realize that actually, if it's half past, then the hour hand will also move. The hour hand won't be on the 8, it will be halfway between the 8 and the 9. So it's kind of at like 8.5, if you like. And so because of that, we can see that we need to find the angle here, the angle that's between the 6 and 8.5. In other words, how many jumps do we need to go from 6 to 8.5? We need to go 1 to get to the 7, another to get to the 8, and then half a jump to get to 8.5. So we need to do 2.5 jumps, and we know that for each jump is 30 degrees, and so therefore the angle between the 6 and 8.5 will be 2.5 jumps, each 30 degrees. Therefore, we'll do 2.5 times 30 is 75. So the angle must be 75 degrees. And so this here is an example of a reasoning question. You can't necessarily, in the same way that you can learn there are 10 millimeters in a centimeter, so that because of that, you can easily convert any amount of centimeters into millimeters. You just times it by 10. If you had 8 centimeters, that'd be 80 millimeters. So because of that, that's something that's very straightforward. You can just have the mathematical knowledge of knowing 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. And because of that, you can then easily solve very basic questions. However, a question like this is not something that you can necessarily memorize. I mean, you might be able to, you can familiarize yourself with similar problems to this. However, if you then look at a question that's more like, not this one, if we look at this one. So this one here, so we've got a shopkeeper buying 60 apples for £12. We know that some of these apples are bad. So it's like he's buying these apples but some of them are bad, so we can't sell them. So there's going to be a remaining amount of apples that we can sell. And we need to figure out, well, what price should we sell each of those apples so that overall we make £15 profit? And then we then need to think, well, we're buying them for £12. What does profit mean? Well, if we're buying them for £12, we make £15 profit. We need to sell them in total for £27. And we know that a tenth of them are bad. So 6 are bad, leaving 54 to be good apples. And those 54 good apples need to generate £27 in total. So we need to sell them for 50p each. So a question like this is not something that you can memorize, because you might never see a question like this again. And even if you did see a question like this again, there is an infinite number of possible problem-solving type questions. And so it's because of that you need a different strategy to develop the skills to solve questions like this. With the curriculum, you can just learn there's 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. You can learn that, a square has 4 sides of equal length, for example. You can learn a particular method for splitting an amount by a ratio. You can learn a particular method for finding a percentage of a number. But for a question like this, or the one that we just looked at, there's so many different possible types of reasoning, problem-solving type questions that it's not something that you can necessarily memorize it. You can become good at solving this particular problem by learning it, but that might not necessarily affect how good you are at problem solving itself, which is the core skill that you need to develop to be able to be very good at solving difficult questions. And it is really that's what the schools are looking for. They're looking for students, yes, that they have the curriculum knowledge, but they're looking for those students that have the ability to figure out those very difficult questions. And that can often be the way that you differentiate yourself between other students. So that's the first thing. So curriculum we've looked at, first thing, also this, second, reasoning / problem solving. The third really important skill for actually differentiating yourself and actually being one of those students that actually gets an offer is speed. And speed is always a balance with accuracy. So speed and accuracy are really important. This is one of the things that a lot of parents come to me and they're really concerned about these things. So speed, first off, you need to be quick because you need to be able to answer all the questions and ideally have a bit of time left over to check your answers. And also you need to be accurate because you want to make sure that your child is able to scoop up all of the marks that you know that they're capable of. You don't want them to be making silly mistakes and dropping marks and ultimately lose out on a place because of, careless marks. So you have to minimize that as much as possible. And so speed and accuracy are really important. It's curriculum, reasoning / problem solving, speed and accuracy. So with speed and accuracy, you can do some different things. Actually improving accuracy is not always the same for all students because the reason why they might be dropping marks could be so many different things. It could be that they're confident with the topic itself. It could be that actually they're working super hard because they don't necessarily have a very efficient way to prepare for 11 plus. And because of that, they're working really, really hard, but they're just exhausted, especially in term time if they're doing their school week 30 hours plus commuting there and back, plus school activities, plus 11 plus prep. They might actually be working more than a typical 40-hour week that most adults would work and then be tired from that. And it's because of that, obviously, when students are quite tired, it's very easy for adults and students, children, to be tired, and then because of that, just make careless marks just from being fatigued. And so it might be that they're not confident with the topics. They might be tired. They might it might be a technique thing. It might be that they are using methods that are very inefficient, and actually because of that, those methods might be very error prone. And so all about understanding, for different questions, there's very often lots of different methods to get there, and just being aware of what those different methods are and when it's most useful to actually use them can really go a long way to actually building accuracy. Understanding when it's appropriate to use different methods and when you want to use methods, you want to understand different methods because sometimes that method might be really efficient, it might be really quick, and it might be a kind of method that's reliable in that case, but then that same method applied to a different question could be very error prone. And understanding when it's useful to use those methods is really helpful. So, okay, just to do a quick recap, 3 most important areas: curriculum, reasoning, speed and accuracy. So those are the 3 areas that really make a huge difference. We looked at, for example, we can talk about how to improve them. So when it comes to the curriculum, what you really want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you're learning the curriculum in a way that's efficient. One of the things that can often go wrong is essentially learning the content in quite an inefficient way. And just to preface this slightly, when it comes to passing the 11 plus, really it's always a race against the clock, because all students will get to that 11 plus level. The reality is that because it's so competitive nowadays with so many students applying, a lot of students, the students that actually pass, will get to that 11 plus standard before the exam, but most students won't get there until late year 6, year 7, year 8. For the average student who doesn't take the 11 plus, they won't get to that 11 plus standard until like year 8, year 9. And so really with 11 plus, it's a race against the clock. It's all about getting those very advanced skills, mastering the curriculum, developing very advanced reasoning skills, and developing a very strong understanding of what the different methods are, and using appropriate methods and exam technique to maximize speed and minimize errors so you can be as accurate as possible. And so you have to think about it in terms of that. It's all about what can we do so that we make as much progress in the shortest amount of time. One of the best ways that you can do that comes with the curriculum, because with the curriculum, and because there's the expectation of to be competitive, you have to have the year 6 curriculum mastered. You have to learn that content as efficiently as possible. So a very basic way of doing that, and a way that a lot of people go wrong with, is a lot of students will prepare for 11 plus by learning all of the content A to Z from start to finish, going through every single question, every single topic. For example, the topics that I listed in the free topic list in the description, learning all of those topics right from scratch. And if you do that, it might take 6 months, it might take 1 year, especially if it's content that they haven't seen at all before. Developing the algebra skills and the ratio skills to get to that end of year 6 standard, and also the end of year 6 standard within all of the topics, can take a long time if you go through A to Z. One of the most important things that you can actually do is initially just figure out exactly which are the areas that actually need work, which areas have they already mastered, and which ones haven't they. Focusing in on specifically which are those areas that need more work. And this has to be granular, it has to be specific. For example, if you know, for example, that they need work on fractions, it's actually not that helpful to know that they need work on fractions. You need to know specifically, oh, they already understand converting mixed numbers to improper fractions and vice versa, but they don't have a very strong grasp of dividing fractions, especially when we have to do a mixed number divided by a fraction, for example. Maybe this is an area that they need more help with. Or actually maybe that they're very strong with ratio, but they haven't seen the types of questions yet where they have to combine 2 ratios together. But actually they're really strong with the rest of ratio. They know how to split an amount by ratio. They know how to simplify ratios. And it is really this specificity, it's understanding specifically out of the many 11 plus maths topics that there are, understanding specifically which areas do they not understand and focusing in on those is the clarity on what you need to focus on, because you can save so much time. It really is understated just how important this is, because it is that clarity on exactly what you need to prioritize that saves so much time. And it means that you can then make sure that you focus in on those areas and you have the curriculum mastered in maybe 3 months as opposed to 12. And obviously considering, you know, you need to then take those topics and understand the shortcuts, understand better techniques. You need to take those topics and then apply them to increasingly more complex word problems. You have to have that curriculum mastered as soon as possible. And the only way that you can do that is by moving through it as efficiently as possible, by having clarity on specifically which areas to focus in on. A lot of parents make the mistake of thinking, oh, we haven't covered anything yet, so we're not going to do an assessment. I don't want to knock my child's confidence. I want to make sure that we've covered everything before we do any assessment. However, it's not the right approach, because if you do that, it will take too long and you'll get to pretty much a few months away from the exam and think, oh, wow, okay, now we need to actually think about word problems and exam technique and speed and shortcuts and, you know, minimizing errors, etc. But if you only have that much time left, it's nowhere near as good as if you have the curriculum mastered early on by moving through it as efficiently as possible. And in basic terms, you know, for example, the way that we do it with students is that we have online assessments that test every single topic within the curriculum. And then based on that, we tell parents exactly what it is. We give them a report, and then we also give links to videos and targeted worksheets specifically for those areas. However, one way that you can just straight away go and do it yourself is by taking that topic list, which is free, it's in the description of the video, going through, letting your child have a go at all the questions, circling which topics they are that they drop the marks for, and then finding other questions within textbooks for those questions and focusing in on those. It is so important to do this, and it's obvious, but underrated. Really is absolutely crucial to be doing this. So that's the first thing. Is this all making sense? Are you guys with me so far? Deep, I can see Deep say hello. Are you guys with me? Does it make sense, this idea of the clarity of specifically which areas to focus in on? It's so, so, so important. Okay. Let me know in the comments down below that this is all making sense and you guys are with me so far. So, okay, so that's one thing that you can do, is you can make sure that you're clear on specifically which areas to focus on and then prioritize those. And you want to move through those as quickly as possible. Also, something that you can do is this. Now, see if I can find a good example of this. We actually looked at one of these today, so I should have a relevant question for this. So I'm going to show you an example. Let's talk about reasoning / problem solving. So I mentioned that reasoning and problem solving, it can be a difficult one to improve on. And a lot of times for students, the reasoning and problem solving can be difficult because they lack confidence within this topic. And this is a word that's thrown around a lot, like a kind of a lack of confidence within a particular topic, or a lack of confidence within word problems. And I find that a lot of this is, well, A, because students feel like they usually get questions wrong, and because of that, they then just see word problems and they just think, I just can't do this. This is one of those questions that I just cannot do. These questions don't make sense to me. And so it's because of that, that with these word problems, really there's a couple of things that you want to do. I'd say probably 3 things with the word problems that are most important. So one is better word problem technique. I'll have time to very briefly go through that. So word problem technique, that's the first thing. Also, just building the confidence by showing them that they actually can solve those more challenging questions. That's the second one, just showing them. And a really good way to do this is to help them to visualize it. We'll talk about that in a second. I think I have a good example. So it's better technique is building confidence by visualizing it and making sure they understand it. And then also the third thing is practicing with an experience, with a range of different word problems to build their experience within them. So the first one I mentioned is the technique. We'll come to that in a second. I'll show you an example of visualizing a word problem. So let me see if I can get this up on my screen. Bear with me for 2 seconds just while I get this up. So we want to make sure that they understand word problems and they, yeah, I have it here. So for example, this question. So I'm going to share my screen. So if you had, for example, this is a question that we looked at earlier on. So let's say that you have here a word problem that looks like this. So essentially with this question here, it says that, so a boy spent 3/8 of his allowance and put half of the remainder in the bank. He then had £15 left. How much money did he have to start with? Now, loads of students, I'd say the majority of students would look at this and they'd be like, I don't know, or they might be like, oh, I'm going to do 3/8 times a half. 3/8 times a half, that's, 3/16. And then maybe if I do 3/16 times 15, like maybe that will work. So we get 45/16. And maybe if I turn that into a mixed number, etc. So you might think, well, maybe we start with that amount. And you might think, oh, I'm not sure though. Or they might think, well, we do something else. Maybe we need to do like 3/8 divided by a half. So maybe I'd like, no, so I can change that 3/8 times 2/1. So that would be 6/8, or that kind of 6/8. I know that that's 3/4. Maybe I'm on the right lines. I know that fraction. So maybe it's, I've got 3/4. Maybe I find 3/4 of 15. So that would be 45/4. Yeah, maybe that sounds about right. So a lot of students, they kind of see a question, they're not really sure what to do, and they just start calculating. And actually, even if they look at this question, maybe after some time they'll get it, but a lot of students, they won't get it. And this will be, if they find word problems difficult and they don't feel confident with word problems, they'll see questions like this and they just won't get it. They'll just be like, I don't know how to do these. However, one way that you can start to build confidence is by showing them this, for example. So what I've drawn here is called a bar model. Now you might be familiar with this, but essentially, so if we take this whole bar to be the original amount of money that we start with, if you just focus on the big rectangle, the whole thing for a second, So that's the amount of money that we start with. We don't know what that amount is. That's what we're trying to work out. But we know that he spent 3/8 of his allowance. So what I've done here is I've chopped up this big bar into eighths. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ignore the dashed lines, just look on the solid lines here. There's 8 bars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, 3/8 of them, 3/8 of the bar, because 3/8 of the money was spent. So we can say that these 3 bars here, I've colored them in red, he spent this amount of money. And then the rest of it is the amount that he has left. And we know that that amount that he has left, half of it's going into the bank, and then the other half is what he actually has left, right? He spends 3/8, then that 5/8 that's left, half of that is going into the bank, and then the other half he keeps. That's what he has left. So this part here, the amount that he has left, if we just think about chopping up those 5 remaining bars, we can kind of halve them. We can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 half bars, if you like. We have 10 of them. Half of them, so 5 of them are going to the bank, and then the other half is what he has left. So he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars left. And we know that that amount that he has left, he has, we know, let's actually go back here. Let me see if I can annotate on this. That would be fantastic. So this part, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's what he has left. So I'll just write left. This is what he has left. And then the other part, remember, because it's this part that's all of this that he doesn't spend, this other half is going to the bank. So this is going to the bank. And we know that it's this part that he has left that's £15, okay? Because it was the 3/8 that he spent, that's gone. Then the remaining 5/8, we know that half of it's going to the bank. So this part here, and then the other bit, this is what he actually has left. So this part there, and we can think, well, what fraction of the whole thing is that money? And we can see that because we started with 8s and we chopped those 8s up into halves, we've now got 16 half bars, and we've got 5 of those half bars. So we can say that 5/16 is £15. And if 5/16 is £15, then what would 1/6 of the original amount? 5/6 of the original amount is £15, right? Because this is 5/16 and it's £15, because we know that that's what it tells us. So 5/16 is £15. Therefore, if I divide my sides by 5, I know that 1/6 is £3. 1/16 is £3. And then if I know that 1/16 of my full amount is £3, well, then the whole amount must be £48 by multiplying both sides by 16. So this approach here can help students to visualize it, and it can help them to build their confidence. Just the idea of taking something that's really abstract like this, something that's confusing, to then actually be like, oh, that actually makes sense. And building confidence like this is one thing that you can start to do. So I mentioned 3 things to build confidence with those word problems. I've got another 15 minutes left. I'm going to see if I can go through this as clearly as possible. So we've got to build those word problems. Remember, curriculum, reasoning / problem solving, speed and accuracy. Curriculum, best thing that you can do, figure out exactly which of those areas that you need to work on and prioritize those. It's the specificity that matters. It's not, oh, we need to work on algebra. Oh, we need to work on ratios. I need to work on these specific 4 parts of algebra and these specific 6 parts of percentages. The specificity really matters. Figuring out exactly which areas you need to focus on and then ruthlessly prioritizing those. Really important. That's the curriculum. Secondly, with reasoning / problem solving, first thing you can do, build the confidence by visualizing it and helping them to make sense of it. What you can also do is, I won't have time to go through this. However, just a quick overview of a good method that you can use for problem solving is a method that I taught last year in the summer course. A lot of students had success with it. So this year teaching it as well. It's called the RDPAC method, RDPAC. Read, describe, plan, answer, check. Essentially reading the question and focus on paying attention to the detail, underlining anything that you might need with your calculations, describing the question in your own words in your head. So for example, you can be like here, let's go back to our example. You might say, okay, so we have a boy, he's spending some of his money, and then there's going to be some money that's left. And then that money that's left, half of that's going to the bank. And then the other half of that money is £15. And I need to kind of somehow use that to work out what fraction of the original amount that is. And if I know that that's £15 and I know what fraction of it is of the original amount, then I can kind of use that to kind of bit by bit work out the whole amount. So that would be me kind of describing it. And I've also kind of just planned that too. Sorry, I really am rushing this. But describing it in your own words, what's going on in that question, help, like in your own head, describe that question in your own words. For example, like another one would be like this one here. So there's like, there's these pupils and there's a teacher who has apple juice, and the teacher's pouring some apple juice, and the teacher's going to like start with some apple juice, and then they're going to pour the apple juice for every student in the class. And then after they've poured the apple juice, there's going to be some apple juice left, and that's what I need to work out. That's me just describing the question in my own words. So I've read it, I've underlined the key information. I've then described it in my own words. What I would then do is I'd plan it. So, okay, for this one here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work out, well, I'm going to work out how much apple juice they pour. So I'm going to do 29 times 215. And then whatever that gives me, that's how much apple juice that's been poured. I'm going to just take that away from the original amount. And then whatever I get, that's what the amount is. So I've planned it. Then I would answer it, I'd calculate it all, and then I'd check it. And there's lots of different things you need to do when you check. But one of the best ways that you can actually check your answers is not by doing that whole answer every question, then check at the end, but is actually just do a very fast check. Estimating is really important. It's one of the most important skills that you can build within 11 plus math, the ability to quickly estimate numbers. For example, with this, you could be like, oh, well, there's roughly 30 pupils, and they're roughly getting about 200 milliliters. So I know that roughly 6,000 milliliters is poured. And if I know this is 7,000 milliliters, then I know that roughly the amount that's left should be about 1,000 milliliters. So just to quickly check like that. And I think the answer to this is 765. I think, but I'm just remembering from earlier. So, and you could say, well, that's roughly about correct. Obviously, if you ended up with a negative answer, you know, that can't be right. If you ended up with a really small answer, then that can't be right either. Or if you ended up with a really big answer, then you know that that can't be right. Actually, this looks about correct because rounded to the nearest 1,000, it is 1,000, which was our estimate. So a fast way that you can check it like that. So again, better technique. A lot of the reason why students don't understand word problems is that they have no idea what's going on because they haven't described it in their own words to themselves if they get stuck, and they don't really know what to do. They haven't formulated any plan. They jump from reading to answering. That's what a lot of students do. They read it and then they answer. They've never been taught any technique. All they do is they just practice loads of word problems. However, if there are bad techniques that are currently being repeatedly carried out with the practice, it can be harmful because you can be reinforcing bad technique. Much better to learn a better technique that is more reliable and get into better habits, which really is your biggest advantage, especially if your child is a year away from the exam. So with the word problems, we've covered building confidence. One way you can do that is visualizing them to help, oh, this actually makes sense. Second thing, better technique. Third thing is practicing with a variety of different problems. So I hope Saba won't mind me saying this. I sell a product called the Exam Bundle. It's a £37 product, and within there, we've basically assorted loads of past papers from real exams. One of the problems that a lot of parents face is that you just don't know where to find 11 plus past papers. You can, all of the papers that we sell, you can find available online for free. However, for a lot of parents, if you don't know which schools have papers, and then if you actually find some random schools that have papers, they usually, in 90% of cases, they don't come with the answer. So what we did is we just found loads of different papers, like 60, and then we took all these different papers, we worked out all the answers, and we put it all into a PDF. We set up for £37. So if you would like that, just feel free to get in touch. But essentially, the reason why that is an important thing to have as part of your 11 plus, or even if not that, but just practicing with a wide variety of material, is because one way to really build confidence with the word problems is once they have, learned some better techniques, once they've started to be like, oh, I can actually do these, is that it's really important to then practice with a wide variety of different problems, because even though understanding one particular word problem might not necessarily help you directly with another word problem that's completely different, having the experience of solving lots of different word problems from lots of different styles, lots of different topics will really help to build that experience, and it builds the intuition. It's a bit more elusive. Unfortunately, for building problem solving, there are no like magic bullets or whatever the expression is. There are no like real shortcuts. There are better techniques you can do it more efficiently. However, with problem solving, you have to build the skill of being able to figure out problems that you haven't seen before. Because a lot of times those word problems, they won't be the kind of questions that they would have seen before. With word problems, it's not like you can just memorize like 1,000 different methods, because actually the amount of different styles of word problems that there are infinite, really. And so really what you can do there is just have techniques that will be reliable for all different types of word problems, build the confidence, help them to make sure they understand it, and then practice with a wide variety of different problems. And that is something that we provide with the exam model. It's obviously, it's a paid product, it's £37. It's something, if you want it, feel free to just get in touch. Sab, I hope that's okay. So we've covered that. We've covered the curriculum. We've covered building confidence with those word problems. The third thing, like I mentioned, was speed and accuracy. Now, for example, I'll just give you a very quick example of a shortcut. Now, this is not necessarily the best shortcut. It's not an amazing shortcut, but it is a shortcut. And this is a shortcut that I always teach students because I think that it's a really important one. So that is this. So sharing my screen. So we'll cover two quick shortcuts. First one is this. So I'll save the best one to last. First one is this. If you ever need to divide, say, a fraction by a whole number, which I've seen loads of times, you could be like, oh, 5/8 divided by 2. Like, well, I know that 5/8, if I divide that by 2, 2 is the same as 2/1. Like any whole number I can write as 2/1, just like we're used to saying like 1/2 or 1/3 or 1/4. If we have 1/1, having 1 in the denominator means a whole. We say that's 1 whole. So 2 equals 2 wholes. That makes sense. 2/1, that's 2 wholes. That's what 2 equals. So that's fine. So I could therefore say that if I'm dividing by 2, one way that I could do that is I could divide it by 2/1. Because if I'm dividing by 2, and I know that 2 is equal to 2/1, then I can just say that I'm just dividing by 2/1. And then we can do our change the sign, flip the second fraction. So 5/8 times 1/2. Okay, so that's the same as 5/16. Okay, so we get there. That's fine, but it's quite inefficient. There's like this step to change it to be that. Then it's the second step to change the sign and flip the second fraction. And it's the third step to actually calculate. So 3 steps, okay? However, one thing that you can do if it's 5/8 divided by 2 is you can just multiply the denominator. You can just do 2 times 8, which is 16, so it's 5/16. So that's one step. And in the exam, if your child can save a lot of time, this is an example of one very specific shortcut. There are quite a lot of different shortcuts. Understanding these shortcuts, as well as just having a really strong grasp of the curriculum, understanding the Year 6 maths curriculum inside out, back to front, means that over time through the exam, they might be able to save, you know, this might take them, say, 45 seconds, and this might take them 5 seconds, excuse the really bad handwriting. So 40 seconds you can save, 40 seconds. And let's say that there are 10 questions where they can find a shortcut, 400 seconds, that's over 6 minutes. It's almost 7 minutes. And like, that's a huge amount of time. You know, absolutely massive amount of time. That might mean the difference between able to check your answers versus not. That might mean the difference between able to finish all the questions versus not. That will make the difference between actually passing the 11 plus and not. So being aware of these shortcuts and when to use them is so important. And for example, if this, you might also find an even better one. For example, 4/9 divided by 2, where you could do this is you can actually divide the numerator. Again, rather than making it equal to 2/1, changing the sign, flipping the second fraction, multiplying. No, you can just divide the numerator. So 4/9 divided by 2, you can just divide the numerator to get 2/9. So sometimes you can divide the numerator. Other times, we looked at one a second ago, we couldn't divide the numerator. If you can't divide the numerator, you can just multiply the denominator. So that's a shortcut. And there are so many of them. Knowing the shortcuts, really important. Also, another random shortcut, which is loads of students, they love this one. I won't be able to explain why this works. And because of that, I wouldn't show this to your child, because another thing that's so important, and I'm just going to take the risk and show you anyway, but one thing that you also don't want to do is just to know loads of shortcuts, but not understand why they work, because that just means having the surface level knowledge, which can actually be a hindrance when it comes to the exam, because if you just have the surface level knowledge, you can just throw them off because they're just not sure when to apply the shortcuts. I will show the shortcut anyway. I won't have time to explain why it works, but we'll at least cover it. So one thing is this. So you can say, if you want to find, say, 10% of, let's say 10% of 40, that is actually equal to, so if I say 10% of 40, 10% of 40, and if you know the shortcut, you might know what's coming, but 10% of 40 is actually equal to 40% of 10. And this is always the case for all numbers. 1,000,000% of 12 is the same as 12% of 1,000,000. 5% of 40 is the same as 40% of 5. 80% of 9 is the same as 9% of 80. So 80% of 9 is the same as 9% of 80. So 10% of 40, same as 40% of 10. So that actually turns out to be really helpful, especially if you have a really difficult one like 16% of 25. Because you could work this out by, say, doing, I don't know, let's find 10% of 25. So that's 2.5. 1% would be 0.25. So therefore 6% would be 6 lots of my 1%. So that would be 1.5. And then if I want 16%, I can take my 10% of my 6%. And then altogether I'd have 2.5 plus 1.5. So that'd be 4. Okay, so we get there, but that will take a lot of steps. And I think for most students, that might take, say, 1 minute. However, if you know that 16% of 25 is the same as 25% of 16, well, 25% of 16 is the same as a quarter of 16, which is 4. And most students could do that in 10 seconds. So again, we've saved about 50 seconds. If you do enough of these, you can save so much time. It can be the difference between being able to pass the exam versus not, which obviously has a real impact because it does decide which school that they go to. So learning these shortcuts is important. Like I said, there is a reason why this works. It's important to understand the reason. I won't have time to do this because I actually have to jump to another call in a second. However, that is an example of another shortcut. Okay, we'll probably leave it there. So that's how you master 11 plus maths, focusing in on those skills that really matter. The curriculum is what everybody masters. You have to understand it inside out, back to front. You've got the free topic list in the description of the video to help give you an overview of the topics in 11 plus maths. However, those topics are really just the bare minimum because the reality is, especially because of how competitive 11 plus is, you know, the combined within all the different Facebook groups, there's got to be like 20, 30,000 parents in these groups now. So a lot more parents nowadays. There's also a lot of people like me that produce content. And so there's a lot of advice. There's a lot of parents seeking that advice. And it's because of that, that this information is quite easy to gather. Also, a lot of it is not that useful. There's a lot of rubbish that's kind of posted on these groups. However, the reality is that a lot of parents are very on it and want to learn this information. And so it's because of that, that most students will have the curriculum mastered because it's not that difficult to get textbooks and just to practice and learn the basic topics, especially since a lot of schools will at least teach them up to the end of year 5 curriculum. And then just learning the year 6 curriculum is on top of that. So the curriculum is the bare minimum to be competitive. However, with the curriculum, what stumbles most people is spending way too long learning it and making the mistake of thinking, oh, we must learn all the topics before we do any assessment. And then because of that, you wait right until the end, or maybe just like a few months, 6 months away, when by that point, you could have saved so much time. You might have saved 6 months of study time by thinking, no, we're not going to learn everything A to Z. There's also another, I won't have time to cover it today, but there's another reason why it's so important. It's all to do with students basically forget things. And you want to structure your 11 plus prep with the reality in mind that students will forget things, and you have to systemize and have a process wrapped around the fact that students are going to forget things, and you need to make sure that they don't forget things, basically. Let's leave it like that. But if you go through the A to Z model of learn everything from scratch, let's learn everything, by the time you finish learning all the content, they would have forgotten 75% of what you covered. So doing that A to Z model of learning, inefficient, A, because it takes so much time, also because it doesn't take account of the fact that they will forget things. And so just going through start to finish is not efficient. They will forget it. And so you need to, instead of that, just think, right, what topics do they understand? Specifically, which areas of the curriculum do they already understand? Disregard those for a second. Focus entirely on the topics that they do not understand. Even if it is just that they kind of understand it, but they just need more help, you figure out exactly where are they dropping the marks. We use assessments to figure that out. However, you've got the free topic list to go through, so you can just check those out. Specificity matters. It's not a case of, oh, we need more help with fractions. Oh, we need more help with decimals. No, it's like specifically out of the 18 decimals topics. I don't know that there's 18 for certain, but let's say there's 18, there's probably about 18 decimals topics. 7 of them we already understand. What are those other ones that we do not understand? And then laser focus in on learning those. And then once you've covered those, then you do another assessment. And then again, oh, which ones do we now not understand? And by that point, you would have expected that the scores would have come up, but there's probably some areas that they're just still not completely confident on. And then you focus in on those again, and then you learn them, and then you do another assessment. So it's systemizing that so that you're always aware of actually what they do know, what do they not understand, prioritizing that, learning those, and then assessing again. much more efficient, saves so much more time, and it always keeps account of exactly what have they actually been able to retain within their memory and focusing on that. So that's the first thing: curriculum, reasoning, build the confidence, help them to visualize it, also learn better techniques. The RDPAC method is what I teach in class, really helps. Also, you've got the importance of making sure to practice with a wide variety of different problems. That's why we created the exam bundle. Again, if you want real 11+ past papers, feel free to message me. So that's really important, those 3 things with word problems: the confidence with visualizing it, the better techniques, and a wide variety of different problems to practice with. Then with the speed and accuracy, again, you want to make sure that study time with 11+ is efficient. It is a marathon, not a sprint. You have to take account of the fact that for most children, the capacity of deep work and difficult problem-solving studying that's meaningful that they'll be able to engage in is probably about an hour or 2 per day. It really isn't much more than that. Most kids that age have an attention span of about 15-20 minutes. And so the idea of, focusing 3 or 4 hours of study time per day in term time, plus school, plus activities, plus community, it's unrealistic. You can't do it. And so because of that, you need to account for the fact that if you are taking that approach, they are much more likely to make careless marks because they're just going to be fatigued. And that could be why they're dropping careless mistakes. You need to make sure that the study time is sustainable and it's productive. And you will, because of that, you'll see that they'll drop less careless marks. It's also being really confident with the topics themselves. It's understanding the shortcuts and when it's best to use them, because like I said, in one case, a method might be really good because it will save time, but with another different topic, it might be really reckless. It might be very easy to make a mistake using that. So with speed and accuracy, it's knowing the shortcuts. Also, another thing, I completely didn't even mention it, but with speed and accuracy, one thing that really helps is building mental math skills. So it's not just times tables, but it's developing something called number sense. It's the ability to manipulate numbers in your head. For example, if I was to do like 12 times 15, I could do like 10 times 12 is 120, 5 times 12 is 60, added together 180. So I've been able to manage those numbers in my head and kind of piece them together, kind of work out different operations, like, okay, that part there's 120, this part has 60, putting them together 180. The ability to do more complex calculations like that, and ones that are even more advanced in your head mentally, will build number sense. And that is the core skill that leads to more speed and accuracy. You also need to learn the shortcuts as well. Anyway, we're going to leave it at that. I hope that you've been able to take some of this in and it hasn't just felt like me ranting at you. But I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that this has been valuable. Good luck on your 11+ journey. It really can be quite a daunting experience. There are a lot of people out in these groups to help you, so I just make the most of it. Feel free to, there's loads of lovely, helpful admins within this group and others. Feel free to reach out to them. Feel free to ask them questions. I'm sure that there'd be a lot of people have kind of their own area of expertise. For mine, it's the maths. Although I do partner with people that can help with the other subjects, but even within this group, I know that there's some people that specialize with creative writing and VR and other different topics. So definitely make use of the community, because most people here are really willing to help you. But just absolutely best of luck with everything, particularly if your child's going into year 5 or if they have exams coming up this year. Best of luck. Hope you have a good evening. Again, thank you so much to Saba for allowing me to put this Facebook Live on. I have put my topic list in the description of the video. Make sure to take advantage of that. It's completely free. Otherwise, that'll be it, guys. I got to run, but have a good evening. Lovely to see you here. And I'll hopefully see you again very soon. See you later. Have a good evening.